All right, y'all, let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. If you are watching this video, that means that you want to talk about the spoilers of Superman. If you don't want all the goods and you want to check out the movie for yourself, then you can go back, stop the video, go watch the movie, or you can check out my non-spoiler review. If you jumped ahead of yourself and you're watching this video, and you're new to the channel, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to be updated on more content. Um, and you can share your thoughts down below if you saw the movie already. What you like, what you didn't like, what's your favorite parts. So we're going to get into it. This will be the spoiler discussion of Superman 2025, starring David Cornsweet and Nicholas Hoult. Yep, I've been holding my breath trying to do this review um, without spoiling it, and I decided to save it. So the beginning of this movie starts off just like what you saw in the trailers. Basically, Superman. Well, there is this narrative that's this text across the screen that talks about everything, and everything's in threes, 3 decades, uh, 3 centuries, 3 years, 3 months. Everything's in threes, and it breaks down to where metahumans, 3 centuries, metahumans existed, and godlike people. You can just put all of them in one little group. And we are broken down to 300 years, um, decades, the months, all the way down to the years. Superman has been around for 3 years, and then we go into 3 months or 3 weeks where he got himself involved in a war between Baravia and I forget the other country, but he got himself involved in a war and stopped Baravia from invading this one country. So in retaliation, um, they explain to you that the Hammer of Baravia uh, tracks down Suits, comes to the U.S., comes to Metropolis, tracks down Suits, and Superman takes his first L. He gets his first loss, and the next thing you know, he crash lands. Um, and I will only point out the significant parts as I go along. So try to keep up, and I'm gonna do the best that I can to separate the Superman fanboy side of me, this comic book part of me, versus the you know critiquing this movie. So Soup's crash lands, and he's broken up real bad, and uh, he can't even move. He's banged up. What you saw in the trailer. He calls for Crypto. Crypto comes help him out, takes him back to the fortress, and um, as Crypto drags him in the fortress, and you pretty much have seen all the stuff in the clips from online, the introduction to the robots and stuff, and he's healing from the solar radiation. Engineer tracks him down. She tracks down where he crash lands, and she lets Lex know that she's located the Fortress of Solitude. She's found it. So Superman is healed, and before he leaves, he starts talking with the robots about why Crypto tore up the fortress. Crypto is acting like a puppy, and he's doing what puppies do when they get bored around the house. They start tearing up stuff. And so he talks to the robots about Crypto tearing up the fortress. and he flies off. So the engineer is trying to rush to the fortress before it submerges back into the ground, and she doesn't make it in time. So she gives Lex the update. Meanwhile, Lex is awaiting the arrival of Superman's return because now Superman wants round two. And Superman is at 83%, 83% as advised by the robots. Not, he shouldn't go back to fight, but he's at 83%, not at full capacity. And he's trying to fight the Hammer of Bravia, and he gets his ass handed to him again. And these drones are pretty much recording everything. And during this fight sequence, and once again, I'm going to break down each part. First of all, I have a problem with Superman taking his first L because Superman's been in many battles that you've seen in numerous animations, numerous comic books, and the only person that I've seen, well, there's two people that I have in mind that's really giving him, toe to toe, and Doomsday is basically at the top of the list, other than people who have magic abilities like Black Adam and Shazam. Doomsday is the only one that I've known that have literally put Superman, like, gave him the fight of his life. Um, and there's so many others, Parasite that I know of, but if I miss anybody outside of Doomsday that has really gave Superman a run for his money, share your comments. So, and James Gunn, I give James Gunn credit, and I gotta hand it to him. Like, there are some filmmakers out there that dive into this comic book world and they make these movies and stuff. And I will give James Gunn credit, but this movie is he literally just missed the mark. And for me, he literally missed the mark, and the pacing of this movie, and just me trying to explain the premise in my non-spoiler review, trying to explain literally what this movie is about, like literally the plot. So I'm going to get back into it. But I will give James Gunn credit for doing this, and I like the fact that he uses underrated characters, and he tries to get people to acknowledge some of these characters that are underrated. Um, and then he could have just used anybody, but I'm going to get down to that. There's a bunch of characters that he could have used, other than Lex Luthor. Zod could have been brought back into it. He could have used, but I'm going to get back into it. So, as he's fighting the Hammer for round two, and all of these drones are pretty much, um, all these drones are pretty much around the fight, capturing the fight. You learn that Lex Luthor and his team, they're controlling the Hammer of Arabia, and dude is calling out coordinates like Battleship, like he's playing Battleship, like B-14, C-11, uh, G9. Like, he's just pointing to each person in the room, calling out these codes, and the way he's doing it is if he's studied Superman for all of these years that he's been around, and he's studied his move, and he's catching him off guard. It's like he's a few steps ahead of Supes before he can even make a decision. And he catches him and beats him down. And there's one person that sticks out of all the civilians. There's a hot dog vendor that rushes to Superman's aid, and he's just laying there in this ground pavement of bricks, trying to get himself back up, and he's assisted by this hot dog vendor. And Lex takes notice and he gets his crew to capture the guy's face and get his background, get all of this guy's information. Um, like this dude, Lex literally has an obsession with Superman. So the Hammer makes his little speech and he flies off. And Supes is just looking up. And the Hammer goes to this location. He goes inside this one portal where he comes out inside of Luthor Corp, inside of the facility where they've been calling out the command codes to control the Hammer of Bravia. And it is revealed that Ultraman is in the armor the entire time that he's been fighting Superman. I didn't like this fight sequence at all because I don't like fight scenes where you get a little bit and it's just flashing and you're not seeing the whole thing in its entirety. And I don't hate that. I can't enjoy a good action movie where they're doing a whole bunch of flashing around and you're only seeing bits and pieces. You're not seeing too much of a full fight. So I really couldn't enjoy it. Like you can just show one scene where he's just calling out the coordinates, but just let the whole entire fight play out. I just didn't think that it was enough there for me to indulge in it and enjoy it. And there are many more moments like that in the film. Even including the pacing, including the sloppy editing with the transition from one scene to the next, and that's what literally happened in this scene. Um, he's looking up, and then we just transition to Clark rushing in to work. Um, Prior to that, you hear the president of Boravia, um, making his little speech. Everybody's praising the Hammer of Boravia, and the president is like, pretty much Superman shouldn't have came over here. And if he does it again, it's going to happen again. But the transition from him being in the ground to Clark, and it's like you don't know where the timeline is. If this is later on in the film or what have you, you don't even know. He's just rushing late for work, and you're introduced to the staff: Kat, Perry White, Jimmy, Lois, your Lombard. You're introduced to the Daily Planet employees, the main characters. And Soups comes in there, and Jimmy, right off the breaks, just is clowning him. Superman got his butt kicked, and there's some bantering, between the two. And then he make Clark at this point. He's Clark. He makes a comment like, I was real quick to get the exclusive from Superman, and he's good. And now Lois is like, why are you getting all these exclusives? You're the first one to get all these exclusives. And he's like, he's kind of boasting or bragging about, how he can get these exclusives from Soups. And he's confident about, it's cocky with it. And we cut from that scene to the Department of Defense, basically the Pentagon, where you're introduced to Frank Grillo, Rick Flag Sr., security directors, everybody sitting around the round table with Lex. And Lex proposes his plan. They're talking about how Superman acted, how he just, no authorization, just went off and got himself involved in a war. And they're talking about how, some kind of way to control him, as well as coming up with a contingency plan, to control all metahumans. And Lex proposes Planet Watch, consisting of his Lex troopers, what he calls the Raptors, the Engineer, and Ultraman. And he proposes his contingency plan to protect the globe, to protect the planet from people like Superman, and he's putting so much emphasis on Superman, like he cannot stand him. He can't stand him. He hates him. And Rick Flag and everyone else around the table, they're not really convinced. Um, Lex is trying to convince them, but they're not really convinced. You know, they're still, you know, having mixed feelings about him. About, you know, they don't like the fact that he left the country and got himself involved in this war. But at the same time, they're having second thoughts, like, you know, he shouldn't got involved, but he's been doing other things. And so Lex, you know, is giving them a chance, and he's telling them, look, um, y'all gonna reconsider. He got something up his sleeve, and he gonna get to the bottom of this, and he's gonna prove his point as to why they should allow him to stop Superman and other metahumans like him. But Superman basically has a bullseye, and he's gonna try to find some kind of way to convince the Pentagon, the security directors, to shut Superman down. So the next scene that you all saw in the trailers, or the, you know, the clips basically online, where Lois comes home and she sees Clark in the kitchen cooking breakfast for dinner, and they have their moment. They have this intimacy moment. He puts on the countertop and they're talking, and you can see the chemistry, and that's one thing that I like with the characters. The actors did their thing. I just have a problem with the writing, and I'm going to get to it. And they have their moment, exchanging kisses, some flirty communication back and forth. And she's basically telling him, like, look, you got to slow down with talking about I'm the first one to get all these exclusives, because, you know, the glasses, they're not going to last but for so long, but people are going to start catching on. And not so much the fact that, you know, they've been dating for 3 months, but people are going to catch on that, hey, Clark Kent is Superman, and nobody knows at this point of the film that Clark is Superman, but Lois Lane. And then she starts breaking down to explaining to him that you know, he's getting how he's getting ahead of himself being Superman, getting himself involved in all of these affairs, you know, of what his actions in Boravia and how he stopped this war, which you saw the clips online. And that's pretty much like a callback to Batman v Superman that you can see throughout this film, where James Gunn not only took some inspiration from the comics, but he's also taken some inspiration, you know, a couple of blueprints from Superman, the Christopher Reeve films, which I'm going to explain all of that. Superman Returns. You got Man of Steel. Um, you can see, you're going to start noticing these scenes. You're going to start noticing these scenes. And so at this point, you know, he's like, okay, well, why don't you interview me? Why don't you interview me? And at first, it begins to be all fun and games, but then Clark literally gets emotional, as I stated in my non-spoiler review. Um, this he's too this character, James Gunn made this character way too emotional, and he's reluctant about it, but he goes along with it anyway. So they're sitting down. Go ahead, Cronkite, you know, and she literally gets into reporter mode, asking him these questions, and he's literally uncomfortable. And she's trying to explain to him the politics and everything that she's saying to him, because there's some moments where they're stopping the recording, and then they're recording, and then they're stopping the recording. And so she's basically trying to let him know, like, off the record, like, you literally gonna have to slow down, because there are some people out there it's all perceived. Some people are not going to look at him in a positive light, and he's going to do something where, you know, regardless of how much he saves lives and what and all the good that he does, there are still people out there, despite the fact that he's doing all the good, there's still people out there that don't like him at all. They don't like him, and they don't trust him, and he's not seeing that, and she's trying to explain that to him. And just to sum this all up, and it gets to the point to where she starts asking him more questions, and it gets under his skin, and then you see him in a rage. People were going to die, right? And she notices that, all right, it's too much for him, so she decides to change the pace. She decides to change the tone, and there's some sensitivity there. You learn that he has triggers, and he's very passionate about his background. And she mentions that there are certain things that kind of rub him the wrong way because he don't want to be reminded that he's an alien, or he's from Krypton. He don't want to be reminded, and he's like, don't bring that up. Don't. I know I'm on planet Earth. You don't remind me. And they just stopped, and they didn't abruptly stop, but there's more to their communication, as to where he couldn't handle the conversation. He couldn't deal with her having a realistic conversation with him, because not only he'll put himself in jeopardy, he's going to jeopardize their relationship, the country. Things can fall apart between the two, and so much with because of his position, um, and how the world sees him, and she's concerned and worried about it, but he doesn't see that. And she's like, he starts packing up his stuff, and she's like, where are you going? Every time we have a discussion or we have an argument, you always want to pack up your stuff and leave. And she makes a comment that, I knew this wasn't going to work. And he's like, what did you mean by that? She's like, nothing. And he walks off. We go to the next scene where, and once again, that scene right there, like the best, Richard Donner raised the bar with 1978 Superman, the movie with Christopher Reeve, because that's Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve, and out on that the penthouse, out on that the penthouse, and that interview scene. That scene is probably one of the best scenes ever, and he raised the bar. He set the standard for these Superman movies. And so back to like I said, I just didn't like what I didn't like the fact that this dude has just been an emotional wreck throughout this movie. And my opinion, it was kind of corny, but everybody's going to put their own spin on their own character when they, each filmmaker is going to do their own thing. They're going to put their own spin on it. So I'm gonna continue, and we're gonna get down to the breakdown. Um, so the next scene, you see Lex and the gang. They show up at the North Pole, Antarctica. They're locating, they're tracking down the Fortress of Solitude, and there are some concerns about whether Superman shows up, and he's like, "Don't worry, I got a distraction." So we cut back to Metropolis at night, and you see Otis and the other henchmen. They got this little creature, this whatever this is, this creature inside this cage, and they let him out. He runs off the pier, jumps off in the water, and you never see him again. And Otis says he's going to grow, and this thing is small. He's like a little gremlin size. He's small, little chunky little creature, fire breathing creature, just runs off and jumps in the water. So we go to the next scene, and the fortress reemerges, comes from out of the ground, and Lex and the gang, they get to the front door, and the door is open, and they walk in, and the robots come out, and Ultraman and uh, Ultraman and the engineer, they lay waste to the robots, and Crypto is down for the count, courtesy of the engineer. She wraps all her nanos up around his face, and Lex looks around and um, he notices the partial message where you see and I forgot to mention, as Crypto was dragging him in, there's a message, a hologram message that continues to play throughout the Fortress of Solitude. And basically, it's Bradley Cooper who plays Jarrell, and I can't remember the other actress names that plays Laura. But you see Superman's birth parents, and they're speaking Kryptonian, and you see them, you're introduced to them when Crypto brings Superman, an injured Superman, into the fortress, as I forgot to mention. So Lex comes into the fortress and he sees this hologram of Superman's birth parents talking, but it's a partial message that was damaged when Superman crash landed, and Kal-El crash landed in Kansas, and the entire message was lost. So there's only a partial message. Um, we love you, and the sentimental message, what a parent would say to your child. So Lex is like, we're not gonna call, we're gonna call him the it, and engineer does her thing. She decides to hack the Kryptonian, the Fortress of Solitude, this computer, to try to get whatever they can get, whatever kind of dirt they can dig up on Superman, and pretty much outcast him, find some kind of way to um, use whatever they can to bring Superman down, to destroy him. So we cut immediately. We transition over to the next scene where you see the little dog, and you saw the clips online. This little dog is barking until you see this shadow covers the dog, and this little creature grows. And Superman comes in the nick of time and he blows the dog, but you can see this creature grew in an enormous size, like Kanju level. Like, just he would be probably half the size of Godzilla, but that's just a portion of the movie that's just a portion that you never got to see. Like, it would have been cute. It would have been if James Gunn would have had that opportunity to show some goofiness, because it was already that was probably some scenes that was cut. You can actually see this little thing grow and cause so much chaos, and but this thing grew to an enormous size, half the size of Godzilla, and he saves this little puppy from getting squashed. And he's just flying around. He punches this thing in its nose, and you can see where they display his strength, like him holding the foot up at his Kanju and flying at speeds to punch this thing in its nose. He's rocking him a little bit. But in my opinion, um, Superman is nerfed in this movie, because there's so much that he can do. But the Justice Gang is introduced. You see Green Lantern, Guy Gardner. You see Hawk Girl, and you see Mr. Terrific, and they swoop down and assist Superman with taking down this creature. And Superman is flying around. He saves this girl from getting from the debris, which you saw in the trailers. He saves a lady, and I believe he actually saved a squirrel. He saved a squirrel. This is how much he preserves life on this planet. I bet he would probably save a cockroach, a rattlesnake, a scorpion. He would save and preserve as many lives as he could to keep this Kanju from killing people. So he saved a squirrel, and he wanted to find a better way to address this Kanju, this creature, but instead, you see the transition I was talking about now? How we just went from one thing to the next, and it wasn't even smooth. It was just a quick cutoff, right? That's the transition I was talking about when I say the problem with this movie, the flow of this movie. It just kind of threw me off. But they are trying to figure out. Supes is trying to figure out how he's going to address this creature without hurting it, without killing it, and they're not wasting any time with it. The Justice Gang ain't wasting no time with it, and that's what they call themselves. Mr. Terrific sends these his T-spheres, and he basically they go inside this creature, and that's it. They just cut off his it just they explode, they detonate inside the Supes is using his X-ray vision, and they detonate themselves inside of this creature near his respiratory system, and they pretty much they blow up his heart. And he catches this thing from landing and falling down, saving as many people as he can save, trying to prevent so much destruction, trying to minimize destruction in the city. And this thing, as big as it grew, it's just standing in the park. Not one building is hit. A couple of little things, but there are no buildings struck. It's like this thing, this creature, wherever it went to the park, and you can see little news clips in the background. This thing being noticed in a coffee shop, and one of the reporters said that it was 7 feet tall, and then it just grew like that. So Supes has some words with Guy Gardner and about how they address this creature. And so with them addressing the creature, and people are celebrating, but that's short lived. That celebration is short lived, and the words, the exchange between Guy Gardner is cut short. Between Guy Gardner and Supes is cut short, and he starts noticing on people's phones and the TV monitors, the monitors around on the buildings. Lex Luthor is like, "Hey, I'm going to prove to you that Superman is here for other intentions," and the message, Jor-El's message, is translated in English, and somehow the engineer they deciphered this message, and the engineer was able to get the entire message in its entirety, and it's played and broadcasted. And Superman is basically a Viltrumite. He's Kryptonian, but basically, if you're familiar with Invincible, you know how the Viltrumites just come to Earth, and their plan is to conquer the Earth. And basically, that was Jor-El's message. The first half of it is loving and it's sweet, it's kind. And in the second half, it's like, the humans are beneath you. You're going to breed and rule the planet. That's why we sent you to Earth. And people are like, just at that point, the mood just changed, and people are angry. And so he goes into the Stag building, and you've seen in the trailers, he gets hit in the back of the head with a can of peaches, and you can see where they fixed the editing a lot. I know a lot of y'all noticed it, but he's not really responding to the stimuli with the can of peaches hitting him in the back of the head. He takes that hit, he walks off, and you can see the frustration and the irritation in his face. Like, and I can, you start to notice that, he's probably in his mind thinking back on this conversation that he had with Lois, and he's outed as an invader, as somebody that wants to take over the Earth and rule over the Earth and enslave everybody, just dominate. And so he has some more words with Guy Gardner, who questions his intentions here on Earth. And they're sitting there trying to figure out, how he got the message. And Supes hauls ass back to the Fortress of Solitude, where he notices the entire fortress is ransacked and the robots are destroyed, and Krypto is not responding to the whistles. Krypto is gone. So now we get back to the next scene where Soups, he's Lex Soups goes back to LeFcorp and he confronts Lex Luthor, which you saw on social media. You saw the clip. He breaks in and he's in John Wick mode. Where's my dog? Where's the dog? Right? And while he's confronting Lex, um, I had a problem with this. I had an issue with this part where he's like, what did you say? Because Lex Luthor clearly said ugly dog with a cape. But Soups is like, normally when you punk somebody out or you confront somebody, when you beefing with somebody, you can say, what did you say? Or I dare you to say it again in a threatening manner. But, if I had those abilities, I'd have walked in that joint like Homelander. Cause, he could have had a Homelander moment talking to Lois, and Eva, he could have had a Homelander moment uh talking to Lex. If you're familiar, Homelander's a antagonist with the boys. If you're not familiar with that reference, Homelander is a Superman copycat combination of Captain America and Soups, and he's a part of the boys comic book issue. So at any time with him being emotional, with Soups being emotional, he could have been like Homelander. Them lasers would have just came out, and that probably would have been the end of the movie. He probably would have laid Lois Lane out. She probably would have been extra crispy too at that point. But Miss Tessmacher, she's been doing the selfie thing, and she has a significant part throughout the entire film. She's just taking selfies. She's being silly, but don't sleep on it because I'm gonna get to it. And she catches Soups confronting Lex about Krypto being missing, and she has the phone up recording his actions, and his actions is immediately uploaded to the media, where they're just presenting a negative narrative about Superman being making himself look crazy in front of the public. So we cut to the next scene where Superman is, I guess we're at Clark's apartment, and he's just sitting there, and you got a cameo appearance by John Cena. He's a Peacemaker, and he's being interviewed about Superman's actions and metahumans. And Peacemaker says what he says. He does his few seconds. He has his his little moment. So Lois is talking to Clark, and she's looking outside, and she sees the Justice Gang fighting this giant jellyfish, galactic jellyfish, whatever it is. They never explain what it is, but him being sarcastic, he calls it like a galactic imp or something, but they don't really get into it. You just see them in the background, which I probably can tell you that's probably the funniest scene that I actually enjoyed out of the entire movie. That's the only scene out of the movie that I thought was hilarious. I thought it was funny. Um, and she's glancing over outside, and she's talking to Soups, and she's like, "Oh, you gonna go outside?" And my man is not even bothered. He's like, "Man, they got that out there." He's worried about Krypto. He's just sitting there moping, and she brings him some cocoa, and they having their little moment like they did in the kitchen. But it wasn't that hot and steamy, not to that magnitude. But he explains briefly about his relationship with Krypto, and she didn't know that he had a dog. And he states that he's adopted. That's pretty much their relationship, and he feels bad that Krypto got taken. So he tells Lois that he has to turn himself in. And like I said, all this is going on, and the Justice Gang, they're outside fighting this jellyfish, and he's not even bothered at all. He's like, nah, they got that. So he decides to turn himself in, with the intentions on looking for Krypto. And so we get to the next scene where Ultraman slams his face into the pavement, and they put cuffs on him, and he's being escorted by Red Flag, the Lex Troops, Engineer, and Ultraman. And they send Superman to this military location, just a few miles outside of the outskirts of Metropolis. It's this military base where he's taken prisoner. Superman is taken prisoner, and they walk him into this. They throw him into this portal where he meets Lex, and he's inside of this container where you're introduced to Metamorpho, aka Rex Mason, the Element Man, and he's in there, and Lex is just antagonizing him. They had a little moment, and Metamorpho creates kryptonite basically that they keep him there and weaken and detained, and Lex, makes some more threats about questioning him about his intentions on Earth. And so now we transition to Lois trying to convince the Justice Gang to help her save Superman, find Superman and save him. And so prior to that, I missed one important detail. Prior to that happening, Jimmy meets with Miss Teschmacher, and she's like, I got some information. You discover that Jimmy and Miss Teschmacher, Eve Teschmacher, they've had this on and off relationship in the past. And he doesn't really like her, but she's in love with him. And he's just been using her for information and, all the exclusive stuff that they can just use for the Daily Planet just for, just to sell the news. And she says that she has some dirt on Lex. And in return, they got to get back together. She wants forever with Jimmy. And he's like reluctantly, unwillingly, he agrees to it, and they part ways. They met in this dark back alley, and they part ways. So we're getting back to Superman, and Lex has the hot dog vendor that helped him up, with his battle that he had with the Baravian guy, the Hammer of Baravia, with Ultraman. He helps him up, and he has him tied in, and Lex decides to play Russian roulette, and he threatens Superman. He starts antagonizing him, and he pulls the trigger, and then the second time he pulls the trigger, and he kills the hot dog vendor. There was some interaction, and Soups actually cries. Rex, Metamorpho, he gets upset, and he's, both of them are emotional in this little cube box, and Lex is like, I'm going to look for Clark Kent. I'm going to start killing everybody that's close to you, everybody that you're really close to. And their interaction between Metamorpho and Superman, across from them, he notices a guy holding a baby, and he notices that Metamorpho is looking across, and it's clear that Superman says, "Hey, if that's your baby, I can help you get your baby. I can save your baby. If you can help me, I can help you get your baby." And so after the scene with the Russian, with them playing Russian roulette, um, he convinces Metamorpho. So I'm gonna get back to the one scene where Lois convinces the Justice Gang, trying to convince them to help, and there's some back and forth between Lois and Guy Gardner. And Guy Gardner, he's like, "Nah, I'm not helping Soups." And Hawk Girl and Mr. Terrific, they're like, he always does this when he can't get his way, or when he's conflicted about something. And so Mr. Terrific says, "Hey, I know what Superman is, and I put nanites on him while we were at the park." And he's like, "I do that with everybody. I'm always putting nanites on people." So Mr. Terrific decides to help Lois locate Superman, to make sure that there's just to see for himself what Lex Luthor is up to. And they go to this military base, and they track down his last location. And there, Mr. Terrific and Lois, they're confronted by the Lex troops, the Raptors. And this is probably I can tell you maybe the best fight scene that I've seen throughout the entire movie that I enjoyed. And Mr. Terrific laid waste to the guards, the Lex troops, and the other staff members that was trying to confront Mr. Terrific. And the T Spears, he pretty much put everybody down. So he hacks this portal, and they discover that if the portal stays open for so long, for a long period of time, it it ruptures. It causes a rip between, because the dimension is exposed to the Earth's atmosphere, and it causes a rip. It causes a rupture between its two universes being exposed. And then you notice earlier throughout the film that Lex is working with the president of Baravia, and he has his hands with the Baravians, and he's selling them advanced technology and stuff, and he's actually helping this country out. And you'll find out later, how he's involved and why he's working with this president trying to conquer this other country. So Mr. Terrific and Lois, they're in this dimension, and he sends these spheres out to track down Superman's location. Metamorpho tries to make his own sense of solar radiation, sunlight, to give Superman a boost of energy. Supes breaks free, saves Metamorpho's baby, but he has to hold the baby because Metamorpho tells him that he can't hold his child while he's changing, during his shape shifting. Mr. Terrific locates Crypto, and the guards are already alerted anyway, with Superman breaking out of the cube. Mr. Terrific frees Crypto, and Crypto, acting like a puppy, um, starts going after one of Mr. Terrific's spears, and he chases it like it's a tennis ball, and he mangles the thing up. So you see Soups is down in this Minecraft river. I forget what they call it, but it reminds me of Minecraft. This whole dimension reminds me of this realm in Minecraft, like hell, right? This, I start getting these Minecraft vibes. And Soups is down there holding the baby over one arm, and he's confronting the Raptors, and it's this fight sequence, and Metamorpho's helping along with Crypto. And this river flows towards this black hole, and the black hole is pretty much this powerful vortex. So with this dimension being exposed to the Earth, it'll cause a rupture, and this black hole will wind up sucking everything inside if the portal stays open for so long, and with the merging with the dimensions coming into Earth. So Soups finds himself on the edge of getting sucked into this black hole along with Crypto. Metamorpho comes in, creates these tentacles, wraps Soups up, and he uses his freeze, his super breath, to blow against the resistance of being sucked in this black hole, and they all fly out. They're safe. And Mr. Terrific, with the one last final sphere that he has, Crypto again chases this thing like it's a tennis ball, and Soup is, telling him to stop chewing up the spheres, but Terrific tells them to follow the ball, and they make it out safe. He tells Lois Lane to Mr. Terrific tells Lois, take Soups somewhere. He can't do anything. He's weak. His body is contaminated with a lot of kryptonite radiation. And Mr. Terrific tells Lois to take the ship. He's going to stay back just in case something happens. He's trying to hack this computer, hack this portal to see if he can try to contain or shut down the portals from, keep people from having access to this dimension, and from, to prevent it from things getting worse. So Lois takes Soups into the ship, Rex Mason, Metamorpho, takes his baby. He's off. He runs. He leaves the area with his baby, and they go back to the Kent farm. Lois, Supes, and Krypto, they take the ship back to the Kent farm where they can let Superman rest. And during that time, Lex discovers the breakout, and he's having a tantrum like a 3-year-old child, and he's knocking everything down, and the assistants are picking up everything that he smashes up. And Miss Tushmarker, Eve, she's talking to Jimmy, and Lex pretty much gave her an excuse where she can talk, have her conversations with Jimmy away. He gave her an out, and he's throwing stuff at her. Get your dumb ass out of here. Something along the lines of what he said to her. And she goes off into the server room, and she's whispering and she's communicating with Jimmy, and she's like, "Look, if I send you this stuff, we got to be all in. It's you and me." And um, Ultraman eavesdrops. He overhears this conversation. Lex catches Testmarker, and she sends the information. So Lois, she's back at the Daily Planet, and she's talking with everybody, and but she's trying to figure out, she's got to find some dirt on Lex. She's got to find something. She got to save Superman's name, and she's got to expose Lex, how bad he is. And they see the attachments, and Testmarker ain't do nothing but send him all kinds of selfies where she's laid out in the spread, and she's got all these sexy pics that she sent him. So we transition back to the Kent farm, but prior to that, um, Lois zooms in on the pictures, and she sees Lex plans in the background where she has to zoom in. So Miss Testmarker was taking these selfies, but she would position herself in front of everything that Lex Luthor was doing, exposing all his business. The blue board, the blueprints of Baravia, like all his plans, she's laid out on the floor with paperwork all over the computer. Like she zooms in, she gets all this stuff. And we transition back to Supes. He's laying there, the sun shines on his face, Krypto is laying on him, and you get some more mom pa interaction, right? And the way that James Gunn did Ma Kent is such a sweetheart, but their their demeanor is there's once again the comedy touch that he tries to add to it, because they just look like average people. They don't you can the only elements of them owning a farm is where you see the cows out in the field, but you don't really get that. You just see two average old parents. And he has his moments where he sits down and his father's talking to Supes about, it's not about the message, whatever. It's about, all the things that you do, that you done is what makes you you, right? That little motivational speech that he's giving to Clark. Um, the scene transitions to Lois talking to Perry and Kat and the rest of the gang. She has this blue board of all of Lex's plans, and the part he played in Baravia. And he basically called back to 78 Superman. He wants land. The president of Baravia is working with Lex. Lex Luthor is giving them military tech, advanced technology, and in return, the Baravian president is going to give Lex Luthor this land, and Lex Luthor wants this land to create his R&D utopia. He wants this to be his empire, his kingdom, and he wants Supes out of the way, along with any other metahuman that's just like him. He wants him out of the way. He wants to use the government to his advantage. He wants power. And so all of that is, Lex Lois is like, look, we're going to expose Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor, he's like this billionaire, like Bruce Wayne, Tony Stark, and he presents himself in public as this political good person, but nobody has never seen his bad side. His bad side has not been exposed. So so pretty much um we get back to where they all get inside the ship, the T Sphere, and they got to get somewhere where they're gonna um they're gonna try to expose Soups. Yep, back to another sloppy transition because that's what you're going to be dealing with in this movie, and that's how I felt. Uh, so pretty much, Lois and the gang, Perry White, Jimmy, Cat, Lombard, they all get in the T Sphere, and they race to a location. They race to the Pentagon, to Rick Flag, to the authorities. You don't know where they're going, but they got to hurry up and get all this information to the right people so they can expose them. And so Superman is seeing this stuff on the news where the Baravian troops are they're lined up on the border, and the president is like, talking. The Baravian president, he talking trash, right? All on the news, and the troops are lined up and ready to go. And what you saw in the trailer, you see this kid and a couple other people they trying to raise up the Superman flag, and Mr. Terrific tells Soups, Ma Kent is like, hey, I cleaned your boots for you. And he was like, all right, I got to get back to Bravia. But Mr. Terrific is like, nah, I need you here with me. You got to be with me because this portal is getting out of hand and it's going to split the dimension. This dimension is exposed to the Earth and it's creating this rupture and it's going to be really bad. And I'm gonna need you here to help me shut all of this down from this side. But ain't gonna be nothing left. So as bad as he wants to go to Bravia to stop this war, he flies to Metropolis to meet up with Mr. Terrific. And you see the Earth is splitting from the military base all the way to Lex Corp, Luthor Corp, where the other portal is. So the Earth is splitting, the city is splitting up, and that little piece, when you see it, that part of the movie kind of reminds me of Superman 78, the earthquake scene, with a little splash of Superman Returns, where if you can, a little callback to where the kryptonite was tossed in the water with the crystal and created the earthquake and problems in Metropolis. So you see the buildings falling and collapsing over and stuff, and you see people are just all over the place. They're a mess on this bridge, and Soups makes it in the nick of time to save this lady because her car broke down. You got to have one of these moments. Car breaks down, and then miraculously, it starts off and she drives off. And Superman is like on all fours holding this bridge up. And the bridge collapses, the building collapses on top of the bridge, and she looks in the mirror, sees Superman, amongst the debris, the dust, and everything. So as Mr. Terrific is trying to get Phil Superman in on, the details, the rundown, Engineer and Ultraman show up and they smash the group. They take the fight to this baseball field. And Mr. Terrific is down for a minute. And the fight now ensues between Ultraman and the Engineer. And that's pretty much the only bit of action you're going to see. Because once again, Lex is calling out these cheat codes, right? And he uses the Engineer, her nanites to crawl up inside of Superman's respiratory system to shut down his heart, shut down his entire body. Soups flies all the way up to orbit. He flies to the Earth's atmosphere, and his face is all covered up, just like what happened to Crypto. And Engineer and Ultraman are holding on to him, and then now this dude is beyond Mach 10, flying straight down back into the earth. And he's trying to create so much friction where it would throw the nanites off because the engineer, she has to focus. And it creates friction and she can't focus. The nanites can't get a hold and he crash lands inside the sewers of Metropolis. The engineer is unconscious. He's off the board. She ain't dead. She's just out for the count. And Ultraman, a few feet from Soups, he all raggedy and mangled, but you see, he takes his hood off and he reveals himself to be a clone. So a callback to Superman 4, Nuclear Man moment. Lex reveals that he found a strand of Superman's hair years ago when, I guess, during his 3 years of being Superman, he found a piece of hair just laying around somewhere in Metropolis, and he used that to create Ultraman. It should have been Bizarro. It should have been Bizarro, but okay, we're just gonna take this clone and call him Ultraman instead of Bizarro. And during this fight, and the clone looks exactly like David Corn Sweat. He just got long hair. My man looks like Conan the Barbarian. He just got long hair. He all disheveled, and he's got this JBL Bluetooth speaker coming out of his chest, and he can hear Lex talking trash. And then now he goes back to calling out these battleship codes, these coordinates, these cheat codes, while he's fighting Soups. And it gets to the point where they find themselves down in the crack of the earth where everything is starting to be sucked in and his black hole is exposed and he's being sucked in. He's just laying there. And Crypto helps him and starts chewing up all the drones. So now Lex is blind and he no longer can control Ultraman. But there are some points where I'm like, well, dag, this dude don't really need Lex to control him because he can fight. He's twice as strong. He can fight. He uses his heat vision and burns Soup's eyes out. But Crypto comes down and he helps Soups and he, takes out these Lex drones. Now Lex ain't got no eyes and Ultraman is down for a minute. He tosses him to the side. So Lex had dispatched some backup where he sends his entire Lex troops, these Raptors, after Superman. And you'd already seen some clips of it. Soups flies in the air. They try to gang up on him and restrain him, but he spins around and he tosses these guys around. You already seen the punch with the teeth hitting the camera, some fourth wall action. And he activates the lasers, the heat vision, and he spins around. And then now him and Ultraman get back into it. Ultraman dislocates his shoulder. Some of the debris is getting sucked in, and they're laying on this edge. And Superman flings him over to where Ultraman gets hit by this bus or this subway train, whatever it is, and he's sucked down in this portal. And now keep in mind, you don't know if he's dead. You don't know if he's alive. He's just sucked into this portal and did this black hole. And this dimension is pretty much an access point to all other universes. So if James Gunn wants to create a multiverse, then you got your Ultraman, you can have your Bizarro, Doomsday can pop up, whatever, right? But it's pretty much the access point, this dimension, to entire universes. So now you see that one little scene where Mr. Terrific is like, hey man, what you doing? I'm doing important stuff. You see that little moment right there. And they catch up with Lex. There's a scene as the city was splitting. The building in between that's connected, this little portion of the building is like a spaceship, turns into a spaceship, and it detaches itself from the building as the two part. And the city is split in half. So they catch up with Lex. Mr. Terrific is Crypto carries Mr. Terrific, and Superman, they all catch up with Lex inside his little spaceship. And he tries to catch Lex Luthor before he hops into the portal to get away. And he has, as they're talking trash, as Lex is talking trash to Supes, Superman has this little speech where he's like, "Hey man, I'm human. I hurt, I cry. It doesn't matter how many times I get up early in the morning. I still put one foot in front of the other. I got, he gives him that little speech. And I don't know, man. I mean, to me, that's like one of them, like I said, one of those messages you get from He-Man or G.I. Joe, them Saturday morning cartoon messages, for little kids. That if you were a '70s kid and you grew up around the '70s, the '80s, used to watch He-Man, G.I. Joe, and these cartoons, they always, Shazam cartoons, they always had a little message at the end where they're talking to the viewers. Hey kids, stay out of trouble. No matter how rough things get, stay out of trouble. Just do your part. So Superman gives Lex that kind of a speech. And Lexus, he don't even care. He's still talking trash. And then Crypto comes in there. And this scene with Crypto and Lex Luthor is supposed to be like the scene where the Hulk grabs Loki by his ankle and starts slinging him all over the place, right? So the scene with Crypto is supposed to be like that scene with the Hulk and Loki and the Avengers. Crypto is slinging Lex all around through the office. Just Lex is banging his head up against everywhere. Crypto is just flying him around the office, just mangling him, just flinging him all throughout the office. And he lets him go. And at this point, thunderstorm out. At this point, the news comes on, and Lois manages to expose Lex Luthor on the news, and Superman's reputation is saved. One of the news anchor women, she says, "Hey, we owe Supes a big apology. It was Lex Luthor all along. He's been working with the Baravian army. He's a part of this invasion, and they've been killing, innocent people and destroying, civilian lives and stuff, and so now Superman's reputation is restored. Lex is taken in custody by Rick Flag and the military. And that's pretty much it. You get a moment with Eve Tessmacher and Jimmy, and Perry notices Superman and Lois going off into the cut to make it look like she's going to interview him, which you see the one scene like you saw in the trailer. They embrace, they kiss, and they're floating up in the air. So Perry's asked Jimmy how long they've been dating, right? And pretty much now we cut back to the Forces of Solitude. The robots are restored back to normal. The fortress is clean. I guess Superman hired a contractor to clean up the Fortress of Solitude and restore these robots. A lot of this stuff happened off screen. So somebody came up, cleaned up the fortress, and rebuilt these robots, like fixed everything, right? As if nobody came in there and ransacked the place. And this is where you get the introduction of Supergirl. Supergirl comes in there stumbling, right? And Crypto runs to Supergirl, where you find, you discover that Crypto belongs to Supergirl. Crypto is Supergirl's dog. And he runs over there, he's jumping on her in a playful mood, and she's laughing, all mangled up, but she's enjoying it. They're embracing each other. And he's happy to see her. And Superman explains that because she, because of her demeanor, she has like this party demeanor, this young, laid back, but this, she's a girly girl, but she likes to have fun. And he explains that she likes to go to planets with red suns so she can get drunk because their body DNA won't allow them to get drunk on Earth. So she has to go somewhere where they have a red sun and she can enjoy alcohol and party like we do as humans, right? And but I'm like, the scene would have fit better and more believable if they showed her crash land on a spaceship and she comes stumbling out of the spaceship, and then you see Supergirl, and then you have that moment. But you just see her crash land into the fortress as if she flew. And I'm like, if the red sun makes her normal, like human normal, how does she get back from wherever she came from? Because she can't fly. If she don't have any power, she can't fly. I mean, unless she called herself an Uber or something. Like, how was she able to leave one galaxy to the next galaxy if the red sun makes her human? Like, just, she has no powers. So how was she able to do that? Little things like that. Um, on her way out, she says, "Thanks for watching my dog, bitch." And she leaves. So then now we get to this, rock and roll music. James Gunn has a, 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 a choice of music, and rock music, the type of music that he uses, like he did with Guardians. And they decide to play. Um, they decide to let Soups relax, and he sees these hologram images of Mom Pa Kent, and their memories of him as he was a child. He's just laying there embracing and listening to the music. And the end of the movie. And you have two end credit scenes literally are kind of a waste of time because they don't really give you much of anything other than the one scene with Supergirl coming in. But other than that, the end credit scenes, one shows Superman and Krypto sitting on the moon watching Earth, and the other end credit scene, like you literally have to stay all the way to the end to where there's nothing else, and they show Mr. Terrific and Superman looking at the building, and it's not even aligned. And there's a little joke that Mr. Terrific, he could have did better, but then Superman is like, "Dang, I can be a total jerk sometimes," and that's pretty much it. That's it. Um, so this goes back to my problem with this movie. Like, if you had to ask me what's the movie about, I really couldn't tell you other than it's about Superman versus Lex Luthor. And it's about Superman, just his encounter with Lex Luthor. That's the premise of the movie. Superman versus Lex Luthor. That's the premise of the movie. And I have a problem with the way that the story was written. James Gunn had a missed opportunity with this movie. I didn't like I had a problem, I had an issue with the way that the flow of the movie, I couldn't really enjoy it because you can see the editing, and the editing was poor. I didn't like the choice of the music. Like, there's nothing like John Williams, his version of Superman, Hans Zimmer, Junkie XL. Their soundtracks. There are soundtracks that are epic. They're memorable. Like, you can just sit around the house and just, you don't even gotta watch a movie. You can just listen to the music over and over again. But this music choice, the selection, nah. There's nothing in this movie, or no portions of this movie, where if I get bored, I can watch this movie again. Right. I could sit down, and the cussing in this movie, like it was just too much. And I credit James Gunn what he did with Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy and the other films that he had his hands on. But this movie could have been for somebody else, and I give him credit for doing this movie. I give him credit for putting his own spin, his own take on Superman. But I don't agree with this character being emotional, but as he was portrayed in this movie. I do not agree with that at all. Superman was just way too emotional. And I mean, like Homelander emotional, right? Um, my man could have just punched a hole in the wall, but he didn't, I just didn't think that it was necessary. The movie could have did better without the Justice Gang. It could have just been Soups by himself. The Justice Gang wasn't necessary, but he threw them in there. And it's basically a group movie. Um, Superman's not rolling solo. It's just about him being exposed, having his vulnerable moments, um, and exposing so much of his emotions of him, caring and and embracing the planet, and him trying to convince people like that's what I'm here for. I'm here to save people. I'm here to preserve this planet. And whether you like it or not, this is I'm here to do good. And he's trying to convince people that there is a side that's compassionate, that he respects humanity. And that's what makes me human too, because I've been doing all these things and I've been raised by some earthlings. Mom and pa can't, he that little thing. But I couldn't tell you, it's like I said, the premise of the movie is Superman versus Lex. That's it. That's the premise. Superman versus Lex Luthor. That's it. There's really no type of motivation. That there was a missed opportunity where you get the plot twist of Lex's plan, and you do see that, how he's trying to frame Superman and seize control and be and as manipulative as he is, but Lex is too calculated, he's too smart. Like he's always ahead of Superman. He's chill and he's laid back. And I give Nicholas Hoult credit. I give these actors credit for putting their own spin on these characters. And once again, I give James Gunn credit for doing his own version of Superman, just like Zack Snyder did his own version of Superman. Richard Donner presented his own Superman, and many others their own takes on Superman. But this right here missed the mark for me. And especially not only as a fanboy, but even just dissecting this movie, the pacing of this movie, I had issues with it, and it's terrible. The editing is poor. There's a poor choice of the music. None of it flowed well. Uh, and that's it. That is all. Once again, the MVP was Mr. Terrific. Um, he, there could have been a little more done with Hawk Girl, other than her screaming, and she killed the president of Bravia. She catches up with him, and even when the Justice Gang, I didn't mention the Justice Gang, they showed up to stop the war, to stop the Bravian troops, and Guy Gardner protects the kid holding the flag, and he tells this kid, "Hey, Superman ain't coming, but you got an upgrade." And he's flinging the tanks around. Metamorpho, he's with the Justice Gang. He creates a hammer. They're all out there doing their thing, shutting down the army. Metamorpho, Hawkgirl, and Guy Gardner. Um, that scene, they stopped the troops from invading this country. And like I said, Hawkgirl catches up with the president, and that's pretty much, he says, "Hey, you ain't gonna kill me. You're like Superman." And she's like, "I'm not Superman. I'm nothing like him." And she drops him, and you already know he falls to his death. People are always talking about destruction and Superman didn't save lives and stuff. Man, like even in the comics, like he can't be in but so many places at one time to save so many people. People had something to say about Man of Steel and how large the amount of destruction, laid waste in Krypton. I mean, Metropolis, and people died. Like even when a building was collapsing in this movie before it collapsed on this bridge, how many people was in that building, right? Rest in peace to those people that was in that building before it collapsed to the bridge. And Superman, you just don't see him say. I mean, he's really not that fast unless Barry Allen was there, and who knows? He could have did the Christopher Reeve thing where he flew around Earth backwards and restored everything, right? Could have had that moment. Could have had a moment with Barry Allen, would have had a cameo scene. And there's so many things that James Gunn could have done with this movie, but once again, he missed the mark. That's it. He missed the mark. And um, don't believe the hype. What you see on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, as I would tell you, go watch the movie for yourself. You ain't gotta take my word for it. Um, you ain't gotta pay the how people they hyping the movie up already. The Rotten Tomatoes score, tomato meter, the popcorn. What everybody's saying. I would tell you go see the movie for yourself. You got my view on it. I didn't like it, wasn't feeling it. There are some other kids that enjoyed it, my kids and many others, but and even in the theater that I was in, there are some people that the enthusiasm really wasn't there. You could just hear the teenagers and some of the fanboys. Not a whole lot, just a minimum of people just giving it an applause. The whole room, there was no enthusiasm in my theater when I saw it in IMAX. Nope. It's just like a regular popcorn flick. It's just another movie. James Gunn created this world, and this is what you're going to get. This his own DC universe, this comic book world, this Saturday morning cartoon, because that's what it felt like that I was watching. I felt like I was watching Superman the animated series. And you basically are going to just watch this movie. You're going to see Superman get his butt kicked throughout the film and have his emotional moments. That's it. Um, there's nothing in the movie memorable, not one tagline that I can find. But if you saw something that I missed, post your comments down below. You know, um, like I said, I'm just used to Doomsday and some other fights that he had with Mongol and some other galactic battles, some fights that he's had with Darkseid, where they went blow for blow. There's some moments where he doesn't hold back and he's unleashed his fury. And Superman is powerful. This dude is off the chain. Um, and the only advantage you can have over this dude is magic or kryptonite. Magic, some type of manipulation where he can be controlled. Um, if you're familiar with um, can't remember the name of the episode. The Man Who Has Everything, where he was subdued by the Black Mercy, this plant that had his mind, his conscious in this other dimension, his moment, to live out his dream, this false reality, and he was subdued by it, to it by the moment, and it was presented to him by Mongol, something like that. We could have saw. I would love to see a live adaptation of that on the big screen. I would enjoy that. But this is James Gunn, and this is what you got. Once again, if you saw the movie, post comments down below. Share your thoughts. What you like, what you didn't like. If you'd agreed with some of the things that I've said, we can have a conversation. Post your comments down below. We can have a conversation. Other than that, new to the channel, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell to be updated on more content, up and coming content. Until then, be kind, take care of yourselves. Peace.